Hello and welcome to another tutorial. Today we'll be looking into narrative structure. How do you tell a story? How do you make your content interesting? Well, there's a very long history of research into narrative structure, and we will use this knowledge in order to apply it to our content creation. The history of thinking about narrative structure goes way back to the old Greeks, and it started with Aristotle and the classical drama structure. This is something that is still, up until today, valid and something worth studying. And basically it cuts any story into three parts. First part is the exposition, second part is the confrontation, and third part is the resolution. And generally we tend to call that the three-act structure, which is first act, second act, and third act. In terms of tension, we have a kind of a growing tension over the first and second act, with the climax somewhere late in the second or early in the third act, and then falling tension towards the end when we resolve the situation. Now, this is really a theory that goes 2,000 years back or more, and it's still interesting for us to look at. But there's been new research into this, and especially a wave that goes back to a Soviet philolog by the name of Prop, and he studied the morphology of the folktale. And what he basically did as a structuralist, he analyzed the parts any fairy tale is made up of, and the kind of interactions all the different actors you find within them tend to have. And he came up with very simple, basic elements that you can basically describe any fairy tale with. Now, the interesting thing is this was 100 years ago, 1920, and it revolutionized the ethnological research into how can we understand fairy tales and folk tales, how we can actually analyze their origin in history, and so on and so forth. But actually it became very influential in dramatic writing. And a lot of Hollywood writers ever since have been strongly basing their storytelling on props discovery. From the US-American side, we have man called Campbell, who wrote a book about the hero's journey, which gives us further detailed descriptions of typical plots, heroes, and their interaction. Now, this is an ongoing research. A book that I just recently discovered for myself is The 7 Basic Plots by Christopher Booker. But you do not need to get into all these details in order to tell a good story. Everybody knows a good story when you find one. And the thing is that we find it deeply engaging, that we find it intriguing, that we listen, and it demands our attention. This is especially important if we try to inform people about scientific content, because at times it seems dry and uninteresting to communicate. So for science communication, today I will, at the end of this talk, attempt to give you a suggestion of how to tell a story when you communicate science. Okay, so I will use a more recent approach that Dan Harmon came up with. He's the guy who created Community College. He's the guy who does Rick and Morty. He's kind of famous, and he's not exactly a scientist, but I think his idea is really, really helpful to very simply structure your ideas. Now, basically, going back to Prop, all stories are a journey that starts with the exposition. Even in the drama, we have this, the exposition where we learn, where we meet our hero, where we learn to identify with our hero and understand his or her home. That's the setup. And with Dan Harmon, that's the first stage. The second stage of any story is that a need arises. This can also be a conflict. This can be something missing, something that is very important for a person, but that or a community, and that needs to be somehow overcome. A problem, an issue, a danger, and it upsets the equilibrium of the exposition of the original state. This is where the hero goes on a journey, and he leaves this home place and he goes to the other world. Now this is has its origin in the fairy tale, where we understand that the hero always goes to the other world, which is like the realm of death, of the unconscious, of disorder, whereas the home is the place of life, of consciousness and of order. So entering into this other world changes the entire feeling of a story. And it goes into the fourth step, or fourth stage, where Dan Harmon talks about the search, where you have to adapt to this other world, and where you're trying to find whatever you need as a key to solve the problem that you set out to solve. And that is stage 5, where you actually find it. So the problem is, in order to have a good story, the hero needs to overcome serious challenges in order to bring that key or that solution back to the original world, back home. And that Dan Harmon characterizes as take, where you have to actually pay the price for the item, idea, concept, thing, magical object, whatever that you found in the other world. And it's a huge struggle to bring it back to your world. And that's stage 7, where you go back where you came from. And stage 8 is you are home, but your home is transformed, is changed, your world has changed because you brought home the object that was needed, the concept, the idea, whatever. So basically, this is the circle of 8 steps where you can very simply analyze any story. So take this, and now try if you can imagine that you could apply this to science. Now, imagine that you're interviewing a professor, or you're reporting about scientific finding, or you are just working on a paper and for a presentation in your class. Science always, almost always, is about solving a specific problem. And almost always, science has an author. So how about you took the author of your theory, of your idea, your concept, or whatever it is, and made him the hero of your story? How about you made him feel the strong need to solve a specific problem, to overcome something in order to change life, to improve life on Earth, for example, or his own curiosity. And then every researcher needs to leave the comfort of his or her own four walls or office. Even if it's just mentally, we need to go on a journey. And this journey actually does enter into another world. Well, I wouldn't claim that it's a world of death, unconsciousness, and disorder, but it is rather chaotic, and it is full of dangers, metaphorically speaking, and confusion. And we do, once we find something that we really know and understand, this is the key to actually solving our problem, we do need to struggle a lot to bring that back through painful work that very often needs to go back to zero and stumbles onto issues of all kinds. So that actually is stage 6 take, and then you come back home finally with the results and you bring them home, and you can actually improve life by having a new vaccine or different understanding of how our world works. If you tell your scientific content as such a story, our instinctive or culturally formed and shaped feeling for stories will jump in, it will activate, it will make us interested, listen, it will create the kind of attention that you need to really successfully communicate science. So try that out. When you structure your content, try to tell a story. You don't have to go by this structure that Dan Harmon simplifyingly came up with. You don't have to go back to the 7 basic slots or plots, sorry, or you don't have to read prop, but you should think about how you can make your science communication really intriguing and interesting for everybody.